Dr. Maya Brooks wiped sweat from her forehead as she stared at the massive black stone in front of her. The alien artifact sat in the center of Research Station Meridian 7, like a sleeping giant. It was taller than 3 people standing on top of each other and covered in strange symbols that seemed to move when nobody was looking directly at them. Maya had been studying the artifact for 6 months now, ever since the mining team found it buried deep in the caves of planet Kepler-4. For to be the planet was mostly rock and ice, but this one discovery made it the most important world humans had ever found. The artifact was clearly made by an advanced alien race, but nobody knew who they were or what the stone was supposed to do. The research team was small, just 5 people living in the cramped station. Maya was the team leader, and xenobiologist her assistant. Dr. Ben Clark handled the computer analysis, while Lisa Park ran the scanning equipment. Tom White managed the station systems and kept everything running. Dr. Sarah Kim was their linguist, trying to decode the symbols. Maya checked her watch. It was almost midnight station time, but she could not sleep. The artifact had been acting strange all day. The symbols were glowing brighter, and the stone was making a low humming sound that seemed to vibrate through the floor. Ben looked up from his computer screen. Maya, something is happening. The energy readings are going crazy. The artifact is drawing power from our reactor. Maya walked over to check the data. The numbers on the screen were climbing higher and higher. This was not normal. The artifact had been completely inactive for months. Now it was pulling massive amounts of energy from their power systems. We need to shut down the connection, Maya said, but before Ben could move his hands to the controls, the humming sound grew louder. The symbols on the stone began to pulse with bright blue light. Everyone get back, Maya shouted, but it was too late. The artifact exploded with blinding light that filled the entire lab. When the light faded, something was standing where the stone used to be. It was huge, at least 8 feet tall, and made of what looked like living shadow. Dark tentacles writhed around its body, and 2 silver eyes glowed in what might have been its head. The creature looked around the lab with those burning silver eyes. Then it opened what could only be its mouth, and let out a roar that shook the entire station. The sound was like nothing Maya had ever heard. It was full of rage and pain and something else. Feared. Mess screamed and ran for the door, but one of the shadow tentacles caught him before he could reach it. The tentacle wrapped around his body and squeezed. Tom stopped screaming. The creature dropped his lifeless body and turned toward the others. Lisa tried to grab her scanner to use as a weapon, but another tentacle struck her down. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, tears streaming down her face as the creature moved toward her. Maya stepped between the creature and Sarah, even though every instinct told her to run. Stay back, she shouted at the thing. I am Dr. Maya Brooks. This is a scientific research station. We mean no harm. The creature paused, its silver eyes focused on Maya, and it tilted its head like it was trying to understand her words. Then it spoke. The voice was like gravel mixed with wind, and it came from everywhere at once. Pain, it said. Trust, none betrayed, always hurt, never again. The words came through the station's universal translator, but they were broken, and angry Maya realized this creature could understand them, and they could understand it. Somewhat. Ben was slowly reaching for the emergency beacon that would call for help. Maya saw him from the corner of her eye, but she did not dare look away from the creature. Who betrayed you? Maya asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Who hurt youth? Creature made a sound that might have been a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Many races, many lies, always cages, always pain. The silver eyes seemed to look right through Maya like it was reading her thoughts. She felt something cold touch her mind, and then the creature spoke again. You different, it said, but maybe lie too, maybe trick like others. Maya felt the creature's confusion and suspicion. It had been hurt badly by someone, and now it trusted no one at all. She took a small step forward, keeping her hands where the creature could see them. I am not lying, she said. We found you by accident. We did not know you were in that stone. We just wanted to learn. The creature moved closer, and Maya could feel the cold that came from its shadow body. It smelled like ozone after lightning. The tentacles moved around her, but did not touch her. Yet learn it, repeated. What? Learn, always, take, always, use, never give back. Maya understood. Now this creature had been imprisoned in that artifact. Someone had trapped it there, and it had been alone for who knows how long. When it was freed, the first thing it saw was strange beings studying it. No wonder it was afraid, and angry Ben managed to activate the emergency beacon without the creature noticing. The signal would reach the nearest human ship in a few hours. If they were lucky, Maya hoped they could survive that long. The creature suddenly spun around, as if it heard something. "They come," it growled. "More lies, more tricks." "No," Maya said quickly. "Those are friends. They will help." The creature laughed. That horrible laugh again. "Help, yes, like others helped too. Cage helped to sleep, helped to forget." Sarah whimpered from her place against the wall, and the creature turned its attention to her. Maya stepped sideways to block its view. "Please," she said. "We are not your enemies. We did not put you in that Silver eyes focused on Maya again. She could feel it, trying to read her thoughts to see if she was telling the truth. After a long moment, the creature stepped back. "Not enemies," it said. "Maybe, but not friends either. Friends die, friends leave, friends." Betrayed, the creature moved to the window and looked out at the empty landscape of the planet. Beyond the rocky hills, there was nothing but ice and snow stretching to the horizon. "Alone, always alone," it whispered. The words were so sad that Maya felt her heart break a little. "You do not have to be alone anymore," she said. But the creature just looked at her with those burning eyes. "Everyone alone," it said. "In the end, everyone dies." Maya wanted to argue, but Tom and Lisa were dead, and Sarah was crying, and Ben was shaking with fear. Maybe the creature was right. Maybe everyone was alone in the end, but she had to try to reach it somehow. The emergency beacon blinked steadily on Ben's console. Help was coming, but Maya was not sure if it would arrive in time. The creature was powerful and angry, and it had already killed 2 people, but under all that rage, Maya sensed something else. The creature was not a monster. It was just scared and hurt and very, very lonely. She had to find a way to show it that not everyone was an enemy. Some people could be trusted. Some people would not betray or abandon or cage. The question was whether she would live long enough to prove it. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the starship Starbound, looking at the emergency signal that had just come through. The message was short and desperate. "Research Station Meridian 7, under attack. Need immediate assistance to crew members." Dead. Lisa turned to her chief engineer, Amy Carter, who was checking the navigation systems. "How long to reach Meridian-7? Amy looked up from her console. 18 hours at maximum speed. Captain, too long." Lisa thought, but there was nothing they could do about it. The station was at the edge of human space, and the Starbound was the closest ship. "Make it happen." Amy pushed the engines as hard as you can. The quarters below deck, Elara Moonwhisper felt the ship change course. She was an elf from the Sylvan worlds, and she could sense the urgency in the crew's emotions through her natural telepathic abilities. Something bad had happened somewhere. Elara was tall and graceful, with long silver hair and green eyes that seemed to glow with inner light. She was serving as an ambassador, helping to build bridges between the human colonies and the elven worlds. The 2 races had been at war not long ago, but now they were learning to work together. She made her way to the bridge, where Captain Hayes was studying the emergency message. "What has happened, Elara?" asked Hayes. Looked up. "A research station found an alien artifact. When they activated it, something came out. Something that killed 2 people, and is holding the rest." Hostage. Elara felt a chill run through her. She could sense emotions across great distances, and right now she could feel pain and fear and desperate loneliness coming from the direction they were traveling. "There is great suffering ahead," she said. "The pain is very old and very deep." Hayes nodded grimly. "We need to get there fast. Whatever came out of that artifact, it sounds dangerous at 10 hours later, the Starbound dropped out of hyperspace. Near planet Kepler 44 to be the research station, looked normal from the outside. But there were no communications coming from it. Hayes tried calling the station. "Meridian 7. This is Captain Hayes of the Starbound. Please respond." After a moment, a scared voice came through the radio. "This is Dr. Maya Brooks. Thank goodness you came. We are trapped in the laboratory. The creature is in the corridors." "What kind of creature?" Hayes asked. Darbrooke's voice shook it. Calls itself Zephyr. It came out of the alien artifact. It killed Tom and Lisa. We have been hiding here for almost a day. Looked at her security officer, Kate Morgan. Kate was young but tough, and she had handled dangerous situations before. Can you get past it to the shuttle bay now? Dr. Brooks said it seems to know where we are all the time, and it gets angry when we try to move. It has grown bigger since yesterday. I think it is feeding on the station's power. Hayes considered their options. They could not just blast their way in because that might kill the survivors. They needed a different approach. Alara stepped forward. Captain, let me try to make contact. Hayes looked at the elf with concern. That thing has already killed Tupia. Alara nodded, but her green eyes were determined. I can sense its emotions from here. It is not truly evil. It is frightened and in great pain. Someone hurt it very badly, and now it trusts no one. Kate shook her head. That is a nice theory, but it still killed Alara closed her eyes and reached out with her mind toward the station. The pain hit her like a wave. It was overwhelming. Loneliness and betrayal and fear that went back centuries. This creature had been alone for so long, it had almost forgotten what connection felt. Like it has been imprisoned, she said, opening her eyes. Someone trapped it in that artifact for a very long time. It does not remember what kindness feels like. Hayes was not convinced. It is still dangerous. Yes, Alara agreed, but not because it is evil, because it is broken. Let me try to heal Eton. Hour later, Alara stood outside the airlock of research Station Meridian 7. She wore a simple white dress that seemed to glow with soft light. Her long hair moved in an invisible breeze, and her green eyes were calm. Despite the danger, Kate and Amy watched from the shuttle, ready to pull her out if things went wrong. Alara walked through the station corridors, following the sense of pain and loneliness. The lights flickered as she moved, and she could feel something watching her. The air grew cold, and she smelled the scent of ozone. She found the creature in the main laboratory where Dr. Brooks and her team were barricaded behind overturned tables. It was even larger than the reports had said, a towering figure made of living shadow with tentacles that moved like smoke and silver eyes that burned with inner fire. When it saw Alara, the creature reared back. In surprise, it had expected another human, not this strange being with glowing eyes. What are you? It asked, in that voice like wind through broken glass. I am Alara, she said calmly. I am a friend. The creature laughed bitterly. No friends, only enemies and strangers. Strangers become enemies. Alara felt the creature's pain wash over her, but she did not back away. Instead, she opened her mind and let the creature see her memories, her homeworld covered in green forests, where the trees sang in the wind, her people, who lived in harmony with nature for thousands of years, the war with the humans that almost destroyed everything, the peace that came when both sides chose understanding over fear. The creature went very still. Its silver eyes studied Alara, as if seeing her for the first time. You show truth, it said wonderingly. How show truth in Alara smiled. It is a gift of my people. We can share thoughts and feelings. It helps us understand each other. The creature moved closer, but its tentacles did not reach for her gift. It repeated, long time since gift, only taking, only hurting. What is your name? Alara asked name. The creature seemed confused. Had name once Zephyr, wind that brings change. But no change, only sleep, only prison. Zephyr, Alara said gently. That is a beautiful name. Beautiful. The creature tilted its head. Nothing beautiful about me. Only darkness, only death. Alara shook her head. You are not darkness. You are hurt. There is a difference. She reached out with her mind again, and this time she did not just observe. She sent feelings of warmth and safety and acceptance. It was like giving light to someone who had lived in darkness for so long they had forgotten what light looked like. Made a sound that was almost a sob. The shadow tentacles trembled, and for a moment its form seemed less solid. Why you do this? It asked. Why show kindness to monster? Because you are not a monster, Alara said. You are a person who has been alone too long. The creature was quiet for a long time behind the overturned tables. Dr. Brooks and her team watched in amazement. The thing that had killed their friends was talking like a lost child's finally spoke again, voice small and uncertain. What? If kindness lie, what if trick like others, then you will know, Ilara said. But what if it is not? What if someone finally wants to be your friend without wanting anything in return? The silver eyes stared at her, and Ilara could feel the creature's desperate hope warring with its fear. Hope was dangerous, hope could be crushed, but hope was also the only thing that made life worth living. Slowly, very carefully, Zephyr reached out one tentacle toward Ilara. It stopped just short of touching her, waiting to see if she would pull out. While Ilara smiled and reached out her hand, the tentacle brushed against her fingers, and she felt a jolt of connection. Suddenly she could sense Zephyr's memories, a beautiful world of shadow and light, creatures like Zephyr, who lived in harmony with others of many different species, the attack by crystal beings who wanted to use them as weapons, the long imprisonment in the artifact, and, through it all, the terrible crushing loneliness. Stares ran down Ilara's face. I am so sorry, she whispered. No one should be alone like that. Zephyr's form began to change. The harsh edges softened, and the tentacles moved more gently. The silver eyes grew brighter, but warmer, like moonlight instead of lightning. You really stay? It asked. You not leave when danger comes? Ilara squeezed the tentacle gently. I will stay as long as you need me to. For the first time in centuries, Zephyr felt something other than pain and fear. It felt hope. Captain Hayes stood in the shuttle bay, watching her crew prepare to leave the station. Most of the research team was already aboard, including Dr. Brooks and the 2 survivors. But Ilara remained behind, with the creature called Zephyr. This is not a good idea, Hayes said for the 10th time. That thing killed 2 people. Yesterday. Ella looked calm, despite the danger around her. Zephyr was hurt and scared. It thought we were enemies like the ones who imprisoned it, but now it knows we are different. Amy Carter shook her head. What if you are wrong? What if it decides you are an enemy too? Then I will deal with that when it happens, Ilara replied. But someone needs to stay. Someone needs to show Zephyr that not all people abandon those who need help. Kate Morgan checked her weapon one more time. We could stun it and take it to a secure facility where scientists could study it safely. No, Ilara said firmly. That would be another prison, another betrayal Zephyr has suffered. In FA's side, she did not like leaving one of her crew behind, but Ilara was not really under her command. The elf was an independent ambassador who could make her own choices. We will stay in orbit, she decided. If you need help, call us. Immediately after the shuttle left, Ilara found herself alone with Zephyr in the damaged research station. The creature had grown smaller since their first contact, no longer feeding on the station's power systems. Its form was more stable now, less like smoke and more like solid shadows. Watched her with those silver eyes as she walked around the laboratory looking at the equipment to her. People make many tools, it observed. Adela nodded. We like to understand how things work. Sometimes understanding helps us solve problems. Understanding. Zephyr repeated the words slowly. My people understood many things before the crystal ones came. Tell me about your people, Ilara said, sitting down on a chair near the windows. Zephyr was quiet for a long moment, then it began to speak. Its voice was still rough, but less frightening than before. We called ourselves Vorthok. We lived in the shadow places between stars. We were not alone like humans. One Vorthok would bond with others, different species, different minds, all connected, all sharing. Jalara listened carefully. This sounded like a form of telepathic symbiosis, similar to what some elven species practiced. What was the bonding like? She asked. Zephyr moved closer, its tentacles swaying gently like your mind touch, but deeper, more complete bondmates. Share strength, share knowledge, share life. When one hurt, all felt it. When one happy, all shared joy. That sounds beautiful, Ilara said. It was, Zephyr replied. Then the Zerathi came. The creature's form darkened as painful memories surfaced. Crystal beings, sharp minds, cold hearts. They wanted to use Vorthok bonds for war, make us connect to their machines, make us weapons against other races. What happened to your bondmates? Ilara asked gently. Zephyr was silent for a long time. When it spoke again, its voice was barely a whisper. Killed fighting to protect me. died one by one. I felt each death through bond, until only I remained. Zerathi put me in sleeping stone, said. I was too dangerous to kill, but too useful to destroy. Lara felt tears on her cheeks. The loss and grief radiating from Zephyr was overwhelming. She could barely imagine losing one person she cared about, let alone feeling multiple deaths through a psychic connection. I'm sorry, she whispered. Zephyr looked at her with surprise. You cry for strangers from long ago. They were not strangers to you, Alara said, and your pain makes them real to me. The creature studied her face as if trying to understand this strange reaction. Long time since anyone cared about Vorthok pain. Over the next few days, Ilara and Zephyr talked more. The elf shared stories of her own world and her people's connection to nature. She told Zephyr about the war between humans and elves, and how they learned to make peace instead of fightings. Zephyr listened to everything with great interest. It had been alone for so long that even simple conversation was precious. The creature began to trust Alara enough to show her more memories through the mental connection. Alara saw Zephyr's homeworld. It was a place of eternal twilight, where bioluminescent plants created gardens of living light. Vorthok's cities were built into massive trees that grew in spiral patterns, reaching toward distant stars. She saw Zephyr's bondmates, a wise old being called Nox, who could manipulate gravity, a young energetic creature named Flux, who could phase through solid matter, a gentle healer called Whisper, who could mend both body and mind, and others, each unique but all connected through the bond. The memories of their deaths were too painful for Zephyr to share completely, but Alara felt echoes of the loss, the bonds being severed one by one. The growing loneliness as the mental voices went silent forever. She also saw the Zerathi. The crystal beings were insect-like, with multifaceted eyes and bodies that looked like living gemstones. They moved in perfect coordination, like parts of a single machine. Their minds were cold and calculating, focused only on conquest and control. No wonder Zephyr had trouble trusting anyone after experiencing such betrayal and loss. It was amazing the creature could open up at all. One night, as they sat together watching the stars through the laboratory window, Zephyr asked a question that surprised Ellery. You have bondmates on your world? Ilara shook her head. Not the way you mean. I have friends and family, but we do not share minds. Completely lonely, the creature observed. Sometimes, Ilara admitted, but we learned to connect in other ways through words and actions, and shared experiences. Zephyr was quiet for a moment, then it extended a tentacle toward her. Very carefully it touched her hand, and Ilara felt a gentle probe at her mind. May I? It asked. Kadalara nodded, and opened her thoughts to the creature. The connection was different from her normal telepathy, more complete and intimate. She could feel Zephyr's emotions as if they were her own, the loneliness, the fear, the desperate hope for connection, but she could also feel something else. Zephyr's natural protective instincts, its desire to keep her safe, its growing affection for this strange elf who had shown it kindness through the bond. Zephyr felt Ilara's own emotions, her compassion for suffering beings, her determination to help others, her genuine care for the creature that everyone else saw as a monster. This is what bond feels like, Zephyr said wonderingly, sharing without taking, giving without losing. Yes, Ilara replied, and she felt a warmth spread through both their minds for the first time in centuries. Zephyr was not alone. The bond between them grew stronger over the following days. Ilara found that her telepathic abilities were enhanced by the connection. She could sense emotions and thoughts from much greater distances. Zephyr became more stable and calm, feeding on the emotional warmth of friendship instead of electrical power. Darbrooks contacted them regularly from the Starbound, offering to send medical supplies or other assistance, but both Ilara and Zephyr seemed to be thriving in their isolation. On the seventh day, everything changed. Zephyr was resting in the laboratory, when suddenly it jerked upright, its silver eyes blazing with alarm. They come, it said. Who comes? Ilara asked. Zephyr turned toward the window, looking up at the stars. With an expression of terror, it whispered, They found me. Captain Hayes was drinking coffee in her quarters. When the alert alarm started blaring, she rushed to the bridge where Amy Carter was staring at the sensor displays with wide eyes. "Captain, you need to see this," Amy said, her voice tight with worry. Hayes looked at the screen and felt her blood go cold. A massive fleet was approaching from hyperspace, at least 20 ships of unknown design. They were crystalline and angular like living gemstones that had been shaped into weapons of war. "How long until they arrive?" Hayes asked. 6 hours, Amy replied. "Maybe less. They are moving faster than anything I have ever seen." Hayes opened a channel to the research station. "Alara, we have a problem." Lara's voice came back immediately, sounding strained. "I know. Zephyr can sense them coming. They are called the Zerathi. They are the ones who imprisoned it." Hayes felt a chill run down her spine. "Can we fight them?" "I do not know," Ilara replied. "But Zephyr is terrified. It says they have weapons that can hurt even Vor, and they will not stop until they recapture it." Hayes looked around her bridge. The Starbound was a good ship with experienced crew, but they were just one vessel against an entire fleet. "Get me a channel to Fleet Command," she ordered. Amy shook her head. "Captain, we are too far out. Communications will take hours to reach headquarters, and longer for help to arrive." Hayes realized they were on their own. She could try to run, but that would mean abandoning Ilara and Zephyr to the aliens, and somehow she knew that was not an option. The elf had become part of her crew, and crew did not abandon each other. "All hands, this is the captain," Hayes announced over the ship intercom. "We have incoming hostiles. Prepare for battle." Stations down on the research station. Elara felt Zephyr's terror through their bond. The creature was pacing around the laboratory, its form flickering between solid and shadow. "They will take me back to the prison stone," Zephyr said. "They will use me to hurt others like my bondmate." "Or you, Snow," Ilara said firmly. "We will not let that happen." Fur looked at her with those silver eyes full of pain. "You cannot fight Zerathi fleet. Your ship too small, your weapons too weak." "Maybe," Ilara replied, "but we have something they do not expect." "What is that?" "Each other," she said. "We have friendship and trust and the willingness to help those who need it." Zephyr made a sound that might have been a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Pretty words, but Zerathi have killed many friends." Ilara stood up and walked to the window where she could see the Starbound in orbit. The ship looked small and fragile against the backdrop of stars. "Dr. Brooks, this is Ilara," she said into her communicator. "Yes, Ilara, what do you need?" "I need you to tell me about that artifact, the one Zephyr came from. What else did you learn about it?" Dr. Brooks was quiet for a moment, then her voice came back excited. "There were other chambers inside, multiple sleeping pods. We thought they were empty, but now, I am not sure." Felt her heart skip a beat. "Other Vorthakit is possible," Dr. Brooks said. "The scans showed biological residue in at least 6 other pods." Ilara turned to Zephyr, who had been listening to the conversation. "Others of your kind might still be her." Zephyr went very still. Hope and fear warred in its silver eyes. "Impossible, all dead, all gone." "Maybe not," Ilara said. "What if some survived? What if they are just sleeping like you were?" The creature moved to the wreckage of the artifact, which was still scattered around the laboratory. It extended its tentacles toward the broken pieces, and Ilara felt a pulse of energy through their bond there. Zephyr whispered, 6 pods, 6 sleepers, but weak, very weak, need bondmates to wake fully." Ilara felt excitement building. "Can humans bond with Vorthok like elves?" Zephyr looked at her with surprise. "Never tried humans, different minds." "Not sure if compatible, we have to try," Ilara said. "It might be our only chance." She contacted Captain Hayes and explained the situation. Hayes listened carefully, then called a meeting with her senior officers. "This is insane," Kate Morgan said when she heard the plan. "We do not know if human minds can handle that kind of connection. It could kill." Asami Carter nodded. "The risk is enormous. And even if it works, we still have to fight a whole fleet." Hayes looked around the room at her crew. These people had followed her through dangerous situations before, but this was different this time. She was asking them to literally risk their minds for a creature they barely knew. "I will not order anyone to do this," she said. "This has to be volunteer." Only Kate was the first to step forward. "I will try it," she said. "If there is a chance to save Ilara and stop these Zerathi, then I am." And Amy hesitated. then nodded. "Count me in two one by one." The other officers volunteered. Hayes felt pride swell in her chest. These were good people, brave people, willing to risk everything for others too. Hours later, 6 crew members transported down to the research station, including Hayes, Kate, Amy, and 3 others. Dr. Brooks had managed to locate the intact pods buried in the rubble. They were crystalline structures that pulsed with faint lights, moved among the pods, extending tentacles to touch each one. "Alive," it announced, "but barely hanging to life. Needs strong minds to anchor them." Hayes looked at the sleeping forms inside the pods. They looked smaller than Zephyr, more delicate, but she could see the same shadowy substance that made up their bodies. "How does this work?" she asked. Zephyr looked uncertain, not sure. "Human minds very different from usual. Bondmates might not work, might hurt humans, might hurt Vorthic. Thea is only one way to find out," Ilara said. She walked to the nearest pod and placed her hand on its surface. "Show us what to do." Zephyr guided each human to a different pod. Then it began to sing a low harmonic sound that seemed to resonate through the station. The pods began to glow brighter, and hairline cracks appeared in their surfaces. "Open your minds," Zephyr instructed. "Think of protection, think of connection, think of sharing strength." Hayes felt something touch her thoughts tentatively, like a shy animal approaching a stranger. The mind that touched hers was young and frightened, but also desperately hopeful. "I am Lisa," she thought, projecting the thought as clearly as she could. "I want to help." The young Vorthok in her pod stirred, and Hayes felt a flood of gratitude and wonder flow through the connection. The creature had been alone in darkness for so long that even the simplest human thoughts seemed like sunlight. One by one, the pods cracked open, releasing 6 young Vorthok into the laboratory. They were smaller than Zephyr, with brighter silver eyes and more graceful movements as they bonded with their human partners. Hayes watched in amazement as both species changed. Kate found that she could blend with shadows, becoming nearly invisible. Amy discovered she could interface directly with technology, controlling the station's computers with her thoughts. The others gained different abilities: speed, strength, enhanced senses, but the most important change was emotional. The loneliness that had driven Zephyr to violence was replaced by connection and purpose. The humans found their minds expanded, able to sense things they had never imagined. "We are ready," Zephyr announced, its form now stable and confident. Hayes looked out the window where the first Zerathi ships were becoming visible as points of light against the stars. "Good," she said, "because here they come." The battle for Meridian 7 was about to begin. The Zerathi fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of crystal daggers. 20 massive ships arranged themselves in attack formation around planet Kepler 4 for 2b. Each vessel was the size of a small city, with surfaces that reflected starlight in rainbow patterns. On the bridge of the Starbound, Amy Carter watched the enemy fleet with her enhanced senses. Her bond with the young Vorthok, called Echo, allowed her to interface directly with the ship's computers. She could feel the data flowing through the systems like water through her fingers. Captain Hayes stood beside her, connected to a Vorthok named Shield, who had given her the ability to project protective barriers using her thoughts. The bond felt natural now, like she had been incomplete before and only now was whole. "They are scanning us," Amy reported. "The lead ship is trying to lock weapons." Hayes opened a channel to the research station. "Ilara, are you ready?" Ilara and Zephyr had moved to the station's command center, where they could coordinate with the other bonded pairs through their connection. Ilara could sense all 7 human Vorthok teams working together like instruments in an orchestra. "We are ready," she replied. The largest Zerathi ship opened fire first. A beam of pure energy lanced out toward the Starbound, but Hayes raised her hand, and a shimmering barrier appeared around her ship. The beam struck the barrier and scattered harmlessly. More weapons fire came from the other ships. Kate, Morgan, and her bondmate Whisper used their shadow abilities to make the Starbound flicker in and out of visibility. The Zerathi targeting systems could not lock onto a ship that kept disappearing. "Return fire," Amy announced, and the Starbound weapons powered up. But instead of the usual energy beams. The ship fired bolts of living shadow that passed through the Zerathi shields like they were not there. The enemy ships reeled as the shadow weapons struck their hulls. 3 ships lost power completely, while others began firing, wildly trying to hit targets they could barely, seeing the research station. Dr. Brooks and her Vorthok partner, Nova, were working together to turn the station's equipment into weapons. The mining lasers became focused beam weapons, while the sensor arrays created targeting networks that could track multiple enemies at once. But the Zerathi were not helpless. They had been hunting Vorthok for centuries, and they knew how to fight shadow creatures. More ships appeared from hyperspace, until there were 50 vessels surrounding the planet. The largest ship was different from the others. It pulsed with dark energy, and at its center was a figure that made Zephyr recoil in terror through the bond with Elarahiv. Queen Zix3 Zephyr whispered, "She who ordered the destruction of my bondmates. She who commands the Crystal Fleet's voice boomed across all communication channels, speaking in the universal language that all spacefaring races understood. Rogue Vorthok, you will surrender immediately. Return to your containment, and we will allow the lesser species to live. Resist, and we will destroy this entire system." Elara felt Zephyr's impulse to give up, to sacrifice itself to save the humans, but she also felt the bonds connecting all 7 pairs, the network of friendship and trust they had built. "No," she said firmly. "We stand together." Hayes opened a channel to respond to the Zerathi. "This is Captain Lisa Hayes of the human vessel, Starbound. We do not surrender our friends to tyrants." Hive Queen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Humans, you form bonds with our escaped property. Very well, you will share their fate." The battle intensified as more Zerathi ships joined the fight. They had weapons designed specifically to disrupt Vorthok abilities, crystalline nets that could trap shadow forms, and energy fields that caused pain through psychic bonds. But the human Vorthok pairs had something the Zerathi did not expect. They were creative, they adapted, they invented new tactics on the spot that no computer could predict. Tammy and Echo turned the research station's power systems into a massive electromagnetic pulse that disabled a dozen enemy ships. Kate and Whisper infiltrated the Zerathi command vessel, moving through shadows to sabotage their weapons. Hayes and S.H.I.E.L.D. worked together to create protective barriers around damaged ships, while the other pairs coordinated attacks that struck from unexpected angles. The tide began to turn, but then disaster struck. A boarding party beamed directly onto the research station, targeting Elara, and Zephyr crystal warriors surrounded them in the command center. Their bodies were like living gemstones with multiple arms ending in sharp cutting tools. They moved in perfect synchronization like parts of a machine. Surrender. The primary asset, one of them commanded. Its voice was a motionless mechanical. Ella stepped in front of Zephyr. Even though she had no weapons, the creature she had befriended was cowering behind her, its form flickering with fear. "I will not let you take my friend," she said. The lead warrior tilted its crystalline head. "Friend, you have formed an unauthorized bond with Zerathi property. This will be corrected." It raised one of its cutting arms to strike Elara down, but Zephyr roared and surged forward. Its shadow form wrapped around the warrior, and they both disappeared. Ella felt pain explode through the bond. As Zephyr fought the crystal being, she could sense the creature's terror and determination. It was willing to die to protect her, just as she had been willing to risk her life to help it. The other warriors advanced on Elara, but suddenly, the air filled with shadow forms as the other Vorthok transported into the command center. The young ones who had just awakened fought alongside their human partners with desperate courage, but there were too many Zerathi and more were beaming down every second. Elara realized they were going to lose. Then something amazing happened through her bond with Zephyr. She felt the creature's love for her, not romantic love, but the deep caring of a true friend. And through that bond, she felt connected to all the other pairs. Their friendships, their willingness to sacrifice for each other, their refusal to abandon anyone who needed help. The bonds between all 14 beings, human and Vorthok, began to resonate like tuning forks. They were no longer separate individuals, but parts of something larger, something that cared more about others than about Itself light began to pour from Ilara, as shadow poured from Zephyr. The two energies swirled together, creating something that had never existed before, a being of both light and shadow that could exist in multiple dimensions at once. The hybrid being. That was Eleron. Zephyr looked at the crystal warriors with eyes that held both green fire and silver starlit. You have caused enough pain, it said in a voice that harmonized with itself. The warriors raised their weapons, but the light shadow being simply stepped sideways and disappeared. They reappeared behind the warriors, moving faster than thought. Each touch of their combined form sent crystal bodies crashing to the floor. More warriors beamed down, but now all 7 pairs were transforming. Human minds bonded with Vorthok consciousness, creating hybrid beings that could phase between realities. The battle moved from the station to space, where the hybrid forms danced between Zerathi ships moving through solid matter, striking from impossible angles, turning the enemy's own weapons against them. Hive Queen Zix3 watched from her command ship as her fleet was systematically disabled. She had never seen anything like these hybrid creatures before. Possible, she hissed. Vorthok cannot bond so completely with inferior species, but even as she spoke, she knew she was wrong. The bonds she was witnessing were stronger than any she had encountered. They were based on mutual respect and caring, rather than domination and control. The largest Zerathi ship began to retreat, but the hybrid being that had been Alara and Zephyr appeared on its bridge. You will not run from your crimes, they said. The Hive Queen fired her personal weapons, but the beams passed harmlessly through the light shadow. Form, what are you? She demanded. We are what you could never understand, the hybrid replied. We are friendship. We are trust. We are the strength that comes from choosing to help others instead of using them. The being reached out and touched the Hive Queen's crystalline form. She expected pain or death, but instead, she felt something she had never experienced before: compassion, forgiveness, the possibility of connection without conquest. The psychic shock was too much for her rigid mind. She collapsed as centuries of cruel conditioning shattered across the battlefield. The remaining Zerathi ships stopped fighting. Their crews were feeling the same psychic wave that had defeated their queen. For the first time in their history, they were experiencing emotions other than hatred and fear. Some ships fled back into hyperspace, but others remained. Their crews reached out tentatively, asking if peace was possible. The hybrid beings separated back into human and Vorthok pairs, but the bonds between them remained stronger than ever. They had created something new, a way for different species to work together as equals. Months later, Meridian 7 had become the first embassy of what was now called the Shadowlight Alliance. Humans, elves, Vorthok, and even reformed Zerathi worked together to explore the galaxy and make contact with other species. Alara and Zephyr stood together on the observation deck of their new ship, watching as mixed crews prepared for their next mission. They could separate when needed, but they remained connected across any distance, sharing thoughts and emotions, and the deep friendship that had started it. Other species had tried to conquer the galaxy through force, but humans and their allies were conquering it through something much more powerful. They were conquering it through love. The stars ahead held infinite possibilities, and they would meet them together as friends.